GreenPilled, How Crypto Can Regenerate the World. 0th edition. By Kevin Owocki. Pixels by Octavian Trout. Forewords by Gitcoin DAO, Glenn Weil, Vitalik Buterin, Danny Ryan, Balaji Srinivasan, and more. Audio narration by JT Nickel. Audio editing by Super Synapse. Take the green pill, Anon. The TLDR. Humanity is faced with global-scale coordination failures that create systemic risks to human thriving. Our legacy institutions are not equipped to handle these risks. We reject the doomerism left to us by the legacy generations and legacy institutions. We believe that Web3 is a Schelling point for the hopeful, and we have come together to build a better world for our generation. Our moment of opportunity is here. We can build a more regenerative financial system by creating coordination games that leverage the properties Web3 has to offer: global, transparent, immutable, and programmable finance. Our weapon of choice is novel mechanism designs, based upon the sound game theory, deployed to decentralized blockchain networks as transparent, open source code. We aim to eclipse the more prolific and more degenerative use cases of blockchain networks and ignite a positive feedback loop for their regenerative use cases by green-pilling tens of thousands of Web3 native founders, engineers, designers, and onlookers. We are bootstrapping this virtuous cycle with education. If we collectively choose and persistently reinforce this outcome, as hope begets more hope and momentum begets more momentum, regenerative crypto economics could become inevitable. For Generation Alpha. May you inherit a world that is better than the one your grandparents did. A word from the lawyers. Not financial or tax advice. This book is strictly educational and is not investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This book is not tax advice. Talk to your accountant. Do your own research. Table of Contents. Forewords from the Frontier. Chapters 0 through 7. Introduction. Why, who, when, what, how, looking forward, and Git Involved. Forewords from the Frontier. Our vision is to establish an empowering, open, and collaborative space where individuals and communities can access resources independent of their geographic location, education, background, or offline identity. By creating collaborative, decentralized funding mechanisms, Gitcoin has become the natural choice for seeding and supporting public goods. The DAO enables building for the public by the public. We help individuals and communities start, fund, and scale open source projects. We are the EVM whisperers, the DAO cartographers, the Internet citizens, and the chaos magicians of the Internet of money. We are the Schelling point for the hopeful. We will continue to discover new and innovative ways to solve coordination problems in a DAO-era world. We systematically uncover or invent these mechanisms, and, if we're lucky plus good, we then scale them. We are Gitcoin, built by the Gitcoin community. Austin Griffith, the Quadratic Freelancer. I was stuck writing closed-source tools for private companies for a decade, After learning about decentralization and falling down the rabbit hole of smart contracts, I started learning everything I could, and I made sure anything I worked on was open source. To be honest, I probably thought I was going to get rich building blockchain games, but it didn't really turn out that way. Instead, I fell face first into a rich community and loving ecosystem of Ethereum builders. I struggled to get funding in the bear market of 2018 and 2019 and was lucky enough to be supported by Gitcoin grants. Vitalik Buterin called what I was doing a, quote, quadratic freelancer, end quote. Someone directly working for the public, funded by donations boosted by quadratic matching subsidies. I earned the equivalent of a full salary building education content, tools, and prototypes on Ethereum. Now I'm reaching a new phase of regenerative crypto economics where I'm streaming ETH to builders I'm mentoring. Danny Ryan, Proof of Stake Ethereum. Ethereum opens up a new realm of human interaction, allowing for fundamental shifts in power, value, and organization. This is why I've spent the majority of my waking hours for many years working to improve the Ethereum base layer. And this is precisely the same reason I'm excited about GreenPilled. The publishing of this book comes at an interesting time in Ethereum's evolution. We are on the cusp of the highly anticipated transition of Ethereum's consensus mechanism, its heart and soul, from proof of work to proof of stake. This upgrade will immediately make Ethereum more secure and environmentally sustainable while improving decentralization, so that the platform is neutral and available for all participants across all contexts. When evaluating a game, a system of participants, actions, and associated incentives, we commonly assess whether it is positive sum for the immediate players, but we often forget a key player in our assessment: the Earth, the future of humanity. Sadly, many economic games of humanity's past and present have not traditionally accounted for this final player, leading to profoundly negative externalities such as climate change. To make matters worse, we are rarely equipped with the tools to understand, or better yet, proactively design for, these externalities. Ethereum is slated to become a tool to allow us to better take control of our shared future. Energy-hungry proof of work set this all in motion, opening up new, massively positive sum games. But we can do better. Proof of stake is carbon neutral while simultaneously improving security and decentralization. This has been a long game coming, but Ethereum is finally ready to make the shift, ensuring that the heart of the platform complements the green-pilled future we are architecting on top. Loie Taylor, Blockchains as Nations. I'm a believer in the future where blockchains, economies, are effectively nations. Not necessarily because it feels right, but it feels likely. Many people already conceive of Ethereum as a nation, but I see it much more broken down. My hope, of course, is that increasingly folks of exploited identity groups own their own currency and economies. So you can imagine a world where, if you want some strawberries from a sun-soaked industry where Latinx workers tend the crops, you must first purchase their currency. You become a tourist in their nation, which is arranged around shared interest rather than land and military powers. There's immense benefit to this. Any turn towards justice is based on increasing the agency of the people most closely impacted by an issue. So while a crypto-economic future makes you a tourist in having to play by the cultural rules of the true stakeholders in an issue, it also realizes lots of financial dividends for them. When people grouped around a shared interest can be a bank, the lender, the hedge fund, the exchange, the stock issuer and regulator, it is the shared interest itself that benefits from the gains of all those financial activities. Vitalik Buterin, The Tragedy of the Commons. The vision of collaborative decentralization that guided the original spirit of blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum is a compelling and powerful one, but it is also an incomplete one. Blockchains and cryptocurrencies by themselves are designed to support cooperation through private property and markets, tools that work best for one-to-one interactions. Most of what is great about the internet, however, is one too many. The very software that blockchains run on and the academic research and math that makes them work was written once, and all of humanity can benefit. Such public goods are vulnerable to the tragedy of the commons because they're available to anyone, including you, regardless of whether or not you personally contribute. It's difficult to motivate people to contribute to them, especially if far more lucrative money-making opportunities are sitting around the corner. Building and sustaining such large-scale public goods well requires new economic models and even a new culture. Kevin and Gitcoin DAO has been at the forefront of thinking through these challenges and actively deploying and iterating on new ways to bring democratic public goods funding on the internet and beyond to life. Balaji Srinivasan, Crypto Civilization. Crypto anarchy sounds cool, but what we actually want is crypto civilization. This means having two opposing ideas in mind, that many existing institutions are beyond repair, and that we need new and trustworthy institutions. That's a combination of merited cynicism towards the current system and cautious optimism towards the next one. Said optimism should be cautious indeed. Existing systems have the implicit wisdom of Chesterton's fence. Even when flawed, there's often a reason they are flawed, as public choice theory explains. Any naive approach may eventually land us in the same pickle, with corrupt institutions characterized by utterance of good intention and substance of bad result. But what if we put things on chain? What if we used all the new tools that blockchains provide to produce public goods in an adversarial environment where all parties know some bad actors will try to game the system, where on-chain actions are finally just as perceptible as digitally signed words, and where we develop explicit metrics for positive sum outcomes? That's the promise of regenerative cryptoeconomics. Like renewable energy of the nuclear variety, it helps make crypto sustainable. It's not zero-sum gambling or negative-sum hacking. It's positive-sum wealth creation, and it's the win and help win of Web3. Griff Green. It's all coordination. It's all coordination. It always has been. Behind all the number go up, number go down degen drama on Twitter, the Web3 regions are steadfast, focused on addressing the systemic root of the major issues that face humanity today: our failure to coordinate around public goods. Coordination around individual wants and needs is effortless. Feedback is simple because profit acts as a Schelling point. Entrepreneurs can make a business plan, seek investment, and if they succeed, everyone involved gets predictably rewarded. This is why we can live in such individual luxury. The coordination required to put a cell phone in so many hands, to pick one of an infinite number of examples, was immense and impactful, yet effortless because everyone who contributed was rewarded along the way. If you want to create value for society or public goods, like building open source libraries or stewarding our lakes, rivers, and oceans, you have three options: beg, sacrifice, or both. Make a roadmap, track your impact, apply for grants, ask for donations. If you succeed, you will get what you need to scrape by. Taxes and donations are the dominant funding streams for satisfying our collective wants and needs. Even though these massive funding streams should be enough to provide abundant public goods for society, they don't, because they are difficult to coordinate. Taxes are distributed top-down, making the feedback mechanisms incredibly slow or non-existent. Donations are market feedback, but there is no financial reward for success. In fact, they rely on unsustainable sacrifice from donors, volunteers, and everyone else along the way. Web3 will change this. We are building novel coordination mechanisms to create public goods while rewarding everyone involved. Society has the opportunity to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit into an open landscape of economic potential. We can create economic games that make collective value creation regenerative. Regenerative cryptoeconomics is abundance economics. Take the green pill, Anon. Abby Titcomb, A New Hope. As a domain, cryptoeconomics embodies many different alignments. Some would say that its tendencies towards hypercapitalization and gamification are lawful evil. Others would argue they are chaotic good. But then there are those who believe it's true good, that its inherent qualities of programmable value, permissionlessness, and censorship-resistant beget a path forward for humanity as we seek to involve the global coordination problems that plague us. These people see an opportunity to reconstruct the systems that control us, to use crypto to design deeply radical socio-economic futures, where our societal values are not driven by extraction or accumulation, but instead by a regeneration and sustainability. While there is much work needed to achieve these visions, designing and maintaining positive sum coordination games is a way towards a future of human thriving. This book is a starting point, a quest maybe, for those who seek to challenge the status quo. It's the seed that will sprout and grow to be the binding force between us as we fight for and build towards a better future. Regenerative cryptoeconomics is not only coordinating the redistribution of financial capital, but social, intellectual, and cultural capital as well. In their efforts, they've become the stewards and maintainers of a movement, a new hope for public goods, if you will. Glenn Weil, Towards New Forms of Governance and Democracy. I am deeply ambivalent about Web3. Much of the space is dedicated to tearing down social institutions that have been central to supporting the development of complexity and protecting the vulnerable, all the vainglorious hope of replacing them with some speculative and highly simplistic new market-driven coordination on blockchains. Simple capitalist markets cannot support ambitious technology development or decentralization people in this space aspire to, as they can only organize scale through monopoly. If we want to escape from the trap of building institutions intended for decentralization only to see them immediately captured again by monopolies, We need to get beyond such simplistic thinking and build regenerative institutions that support public goods and increasingly returns technology. Yet, at its best, Web3 can be one of the most creative and exciting places in the world for imagining these new forms of governance and democracy that can allow people to connect, protect their common interests, and build extraordinary new social fabric beyond the constraints of geography and history. Today's world has global interconnections and local communities and patterns that could not have been anticipated by the founders of today's democratic nations, and we need a new substrate to make this kind of dynamic democratic governance possible. This is precisely what regenerative cryptoeconomics is about. Kevin Owocki has pioneered this space and has done a great job of capturing both its ideas and culture in this book, one that I suspect will be a shining beacon in coming years as the many who are both thrilled at the potential of the space and terrified by its darker manifestations seek to find a path forward. I look forward to continuing to work closely with him and seeing the next steps of social innovation he and the broader regenerative Web3 ecosystem will help imagine. Chapter 0, Introduction. A quote from Audrey Tang. My existence is not to become a minister for a certain group, nor to broadcast government propaganda. Instead, it is to become a channel to allow greater combinations of intelligence and strength to come together. What is cryptoeconomics? Cryptoeconomics is the use of blockchain-based incentives to design new kinds of systems, applications, or networks. Cryptoeconomics brings together the fields of economics, game theory, psychology, and computer science and leverages them in the creation of decentralized marketplaces and applications. By focusing on the individual decision-making and strategic interaction between different participants in a digital ecosystem, and by viewing them through the lenses of game theory plus mechanism design, we can discover powerful new ways to fund, design, develop, and market applications and digital assets. What is regenerative cryptoeconomics? This book is about cryptoeconomic systems that, number 1, satisfy human needs, number 2, create positive externalities and are net positive, number 3, create balance and find equilibrium. Regenerative cryptoeconomic systems have resisted formalizations in the past due to the difficulty in doing so. Where possible, we attempt to overcome this challenge by focusing on theories of human systems that are widely accepted, complementary, or global in scope. That said, there are real contradictions in the emerging design space of regenerative cryptoeconomics. There are trade-offs to be made, and there are members of this space that disagree with each other. We advocate a pragmatic approach that measures results, respects nuance, and thoughtfully weighs trade-offs. First, do no harm. The world is presently embroiled in a debate about the energy usage of proof-of-work blockchain systems like Bitcoin. Proof-of-work apologists have presented many claims that Bitcoin uses primarily renewable energy, but until there is independently verified evidence, these claims should be treated as spurious. The carbon impact of the Bitcoin and other proof-of-work blockchains is likely both large and profoundly negative until proven otherwise. Regenerative cryptoeconomic systems are systems that are net positive, and because of that, this book focuses on blockchain ecosystems that consume 99.99% less energy per transaction than Bitcoin or proof-of-work era Ethereum. Luckily, there are many second-generation and third-generation blockchains that fit this criteria. From this foundation of near carbon neutrality, it is possible to create crypto-economic systems that are extremely net positive. Applied regenerative crypto-economics. Regenerative crypto-economics is a subset of crypto-economics, which itself is a subset of economics, which itself is a subset of the study of social systems. We are standing on the shoulders of giants in Web3. In this sense, we are interpreting this Web3 wave of actors as more of an expression of a historically embedded process than anything novel in itself. For this reason, this book focuses mostly on applied regenerative crypto-economics and on making the subject matter understandable to a more general audience. In doing so, we would like to acknowledge the influences who have enabled us to understand the design space, plus have inspired us in our journey. Influences. Projects who have inspired us along the way in randomized order. Radical, Doing Good, Dev Protocol, Regen Network, Block Science, GiveETH, Common Stack, TEC, SourceCred, Code Fund, Open Collective, Metagame, Kernel, Zcash Major Grants, the Meta Cartel Ecosystem, Satoshi Nakamoto, CLR Fund, MakerDAO, ETH Global, Toucan Protocol, Collectivo, Astral Protocol, Cello, Zcash, Curve Labs, Bankless, Govern, Rad Exchange, OneHive, SporkDAO, Rainbow Rolls, Panvala, ENS, India COVID Relief, Simona Pop, Ethereum Foundation, Deep Adaptation Forum, Collapsiology, Donut Economics Lab, Regenerative Leadership Groups, MacArthur Foundation, and many, many others. Resource consumption types. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. As we define regenerative crypto-economics around what it is, we should also define it relative to what it's not. Extractive. The resource is depleted and the system loses capacity over time. Sustainable. The resource availability is not depleted over time and the system is steady. Resilient. The system is able to recover from a period of shock. Regenerative. The resources are regenerated and builds capacity sustainably while being resilient to shocks. Regenerative crypto-economics can sometimes be resilient or sustainable, but it cannot be extractive. The building block. An impact DAO is defined as any DAO that creates net positive externalities to the ecosystem around it. Impact DAOs are the atomic building block of the regenerative crypto-economic movement. On energy usage. Michael Zargarm, the founder-CEO of Block Science, provides this balanced analysis of blockchain-based energy usage. Quote, "Pretty much every mode of economic production consumes energy. Our global energy appetite is growing, and Bitcoin, and more broadly proof-of-work blockchains, are contributing to that increasing energy appetite. It's true that an increasing appetite should incentivize more green power research, development, and production, but experience has shown our response is reactive, not proactive. That is to say, we remain behind the curve. We need to be shifting off unsustainable power sources, not just onto more sustainable ones. All that said, we should applaud Bitcoin miners who mine with local renewable power by locating in regions with excess the same way we treat another economic production that is actually successfully using green energy. At the same time, acknowledging that the overall proof of work is not special in incentivizing the behavior, It's part of the broader trend in increasing energy appetite, so singling it out is also a bit suspect or political. We should be holding economic actors, including but not limited to miners, accountable for their energy appetites. This means acknowledging those who do the work to source clean power, noting that it's still hard, but also criticizing those who do not do that work. Again, true for miners, but also corporations and governments. For those not familiar with the economics of energy transmission, moving energy, even with high voltage lines, is lossy. So there are remote areas with high natural energy production where excess exists, but transporting it to where it's needed is too expensive and lossy to be feasible. That's the power one can use to mine proof-of-work blockchains in good conscience. Intended audience of this book. This book is a breadth-first tour of ways to frame cryptoeconomic systems to be more regenerative. The 0th edition is designed for those who already understand at a high level what blockchains are, how smart contracts work, and what DAOs are. If this book were a university course, it would be a 401 level course. If that is not for you, that's okay. Welcome to the weird, wonderful, and wild world of Web3. Spend some time with the numerous and great resources about these fundamentals, and come back to this resource after that. It is possible that an inchoate next edition of this book could be extended in future editions. Published in other languages, highlight the most successful experiments, extended to a more beginner-friendly audience. Establishing a ratings agency or methodology for regenerative projects. Published, like for real, not just self-published. The 0th edition is an alpha release. After validating the idea on Twitter, Iolo wrote this book as a side project between December 2021 and January 2022. They say if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. Ain't that the truth? In the course of writing this book, I have made many attempts to consult other founders, economists, and designers within and outside the ecosystem. But I was not able to include everything I learned. Please excuse that I did not include your favorite idea or DAO. Please excuse brevity, typos, clunky layout or flow, or other imperfections. Creating the next edition will be a multiplayer game. The 0th edition of this book was written by myself, Kevin Owocki. I spent many years thinking about it, designing and studying regenerative cryptoeconomics via my work founding Gitcoin in 2017, and through the $50 million we have raised for building and funding digital public goods since then. This book represents the limited vantage point of one person. Therefore, the 0th edition of this book is an imperfect vessel for education about regenerative cryptoeconomics. For the next editions, I envisioned that a diverse group of individuals could co-create resources about the regenerative cryptoeconomics design space. Inviting a wider set of participants to contribute will enable us to explore the design space in a more inclusive, more full, and more decentralized way. In order to facilitate this, number 1, this book is licensed CC BY 4.0. You may permissionlessly fork this book, make changes, and republish them with attribution as long as the proceeds go to the public good or charitable causes. Number 2, if you would like to join the community of writers and educators forming around this book, then please scan the QR code you see on the screen or go to the URL in the description. All future links mentioned will also be linked in the description below. Chapter 1. Why? The Gray Pill. A quote by John Gardner. All too often, on the long road up, young leaders become servants of what is, rather than shapers of what might be. The gray pill equals coordination failures. Coordination failure occurs when a group of humans could achieve a desirable outcome by working together, but fail to do so because they don't coordinate their decision-making. Examples of coordination failure. Nation-states refuse to give up nuclear arms because they want to defend themselves despite the existential threat they pose to the world. Consumers refuse to give up fossil fuel-powered services because they want to get around conveniently, despite the existential threat fossil fuel burning imposes on the world. Users of open-source software consume open-source software because they want to build things faster, despite the burnout that cumulative use imposes on OSS maintainers. Individual cells of the human body live harmoniously, pooling their resources for the greater good of the organism. But if a cell defects from this equilibrium, it becomes cancerous, eventually outcompeting all the other cells and taking over the body. Coordination failure can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. For example, if one firm decides a recession is imminent and fires its workers, other firms might lose demand from the layoffs and then respond by firing their own workers, leading to a recession. Coordination failures are dictatorless dystopias. Coordination failures are dictatorless dystopias, situations that each citizen, including the leadership, hates, but which nevertheless endures regardless. From a God's eye view of a system that has suffered a coordination failure, there is a clear problem. But from within the system, no one actor can create change. Every single citizen hates the system, but for lack of a good coordination mechanism, it endures. Coordination failures are multipolar traps. A multipolar trap works as follows. Number 1, individual humans want to have a secure digital infrastructure. 2, there is costly work to be done to develop secure open-source software, which underpins our digital infrastructure. 3, since open-source software is non-rivalrous, my consuming it does not stop you from consuming it, and non-excludable, one cannot put clean air behind a velvet rope and charge for it. There is no business model for the creation of open-source software. Number 4, this means that each individual actor has a rational incentive to free ride on the system. Why contribute back to fund the maintenance of this software if I already get it for free? This is the first trap, the single-player trap. Number 5, if enough actors choose to free ride, the entire system begins to bear a burden. And if that burden increases to a point of systematic collapse, no one gets these public goods. This is the second trap, the multiplayer trap. Number 6, from a God's eye perspective, the obvious solution is for everyone to do their part to support open source software, but without a coordination mechanism that makes it rational for everyone to contribute, they do not. We face global coordination failures. Climate change is a coordination failure. As individual actors in the world economy, we make decisions every day to achieve our individual goals, but the actions we can take cause carbon to be emitted, and over time, the collective begins to feel the consequences of this through floods, fires, or increasing global temperatures. An underfunded and insecure digital infrastructure is a coordination failure. As individual actors in the information ecosystem, we make decisions every day about what information to consume. Rarely do we think about the free and open source software that underpins that infrastructure. Our global digital infrastructure is not well funded by governments. as traditional infrastructure is. And those free and open source software providers often do not have a business model. This creates a systemic lack of investment in maintenance of digital infrastructure at precisely a time in which we are increasingly dependent upon it. There's many, many more. Misinformation, inadequate access to education, inadequate access to employment, overfishing, the loss of biodiversity are all coordination failures. What's at stake? When your coastal property floods due to climate change, when an authoritarian is elected to power due to misinformation, when a hospital is held hostage by ransomware because of an insecure internet, each of these create human suffering. This local suffering is caused by global coordination failure. The scale of the impact of these coordination failures is global, but the impact is local. Name the enemy. Moloch. Coordination failure occurs when a group of humans could achieve a desirable outcome by working together, but fail to do so because they don't coordinate their decision-making. Why is it that when every single citizen hates the system, but for lack of a good coordination mechanism, it endures? From a certain angle, it's almost like there is an all-powerful demon out there, manipulating us to prevent our mutual success. This shared psychic manifestation of coordination failure is Moloch, the god of human coordination failure. Moloch is the reason why we can't have nice things. We name Moloch so that we may fight it. To read more about Moloch, check out the excellent essay entitled Meditations on Moloch. Know thy enemy, Moloch. A quote from Sun Tzu, Art of War. Know thy enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you will never be defeated. When you are ignorant of the enemy but know yourself, your chances of winning or losing are equal. If ignorant both of your enemy and of yourself, you are sure to be defeated in every battle. The purpose of this book is to articulate the coordination failures we face so that we may know thy enemy. Once we know our enemy, we are more equipped to defeat it. Choosing to face Moloch. As humanity globalizes, our coordination problems are becoming increasingly globalized. At the same time, our ability to deal with these global coordination problems is being challenged. Our generation has inherited decaying infrastructure, declining faith in institutions, or institutions that are not enabled for web scale nor for problems beyond their borders. To face Moloch, we must first reject the doomerism we have inherited from our legacy generations and legacy institutions. We need new coordination mechanisms that are equipped to the modern, globalized world. We need an incorruptible coordination substrate that is truly global in nature to solve global coordination failures. We have found one. We have discovered a device made of pure coordination, and we choose to use that to fight coordination failure. By fighting coordination failure, we could slay Moloch, the god of coordination failure. Our weapon of choice. Web3 is a global, immutable, incorruptible, transparent, programmable mechanism for human resource allocation, for human coordination. Because Web3 is a foundation for coordination, Web3 is a shelling point for the hopeful. We have gathered in the Web3 movement to build a better world. Our central organizing principle is that we don't have to live with coordination failures any longer. Our weapon of choice is novel mechanism design deployed to decentralized blockchain networks. Is it possible we could slay Moloch? Yes. Is it guaranteed? No. We need to choose it. We'd need to continuously reinforce that choice individually and build systems that reinforce that choice systemically. All coordination is a choice. What we choose to do when presented that choice is up to us. Coordination failure, the root of evil. We have established that a coordination failure is a system that no citizen would choose, but for the lack of a good coordination mechanism, it endures. This book takes the position that there aren't many people born bad out there. Instead, we believe that people are born good, made from 99.9% of the same DNA as you and I, who have been shaped by the systems around them to act poorly towards one another. Henry David Thoreau once said, "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the root." By aiming to systemically address coordination failures, we hope to strike at the root. The degen to regen pipeline. The meme degens came about during the DeFi summer of 2020, a playful adjective to describe the many Web3 enthusiasts who were yield farming on systems with high APYs, but also sometimes high likelihood of failure. Since then, the degen meme has come to mean anyone who is into Web3 for primarily short-term economic return. Driven by headlines about the bull market, thousands of enthusiasts enter Web3 with the intention of making a quick buck. Anecdotally, I've found that many regens came into the ecosystem through this path. Lured by the promise of better economic circumstances for themselves, they tried to enter the ecosystem to make a short-term profit. Over time, they become more enamored by the promise of a DAO whose mission aligns with their own value set, and their attitude and incentives shifted. They start contributing, they start learning to manage risk and ride the volatility. Chapter 2. Who we biddle for. The Gitcoin DAO mission statement. We build for human thriving. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. We build for human thriving. The opposite of coordination failure is coordination. To some, optimal coordination creates thriving for a small group of elites. To us, optimal coordination creates human thriving for many. We are designing a regenerative internet of value to enable the thriving of a diverse global citizenry. Each individual on Earth is a three-dimensional human with differing values, cultures, ambitions, backgrounds, geographies, psychological orientations, financial endowments, privilege levels, abilities, and physical or psychological archetypes. While we celebrate our diversity, we also recognize our opportunity to address the common needs that every human has. Beyond just addressing these needs, we aim to enable human thriving. We build for a bento box of incentives. Instead of focusing on designing systems for instant gratification, now me, we propose that regenerative crypto-economic systems that build for human thriving expand their design goals from gratifying me to gratifying us, and from focusing on now to focusing on the future. The result is a bento box of design goals. Instead of designing for now me, we also design for future us, future me, and now us. Yancey Strickler, the founder of Kickstarter, is the author of The Theory of Bentoism. Bentoism, an acronym for Beyond Near-Term Orientation, is a wider lens for what is valuable and in our self-interest. Bentoism is the theory that self-interest is multidimensional. To learn more about Bentoism, go to the Bento Society website at bentoism.org. We build for public goods, the stuff we all use but don't pay for, and sometimes take for granted. Some examples would be fresh air, open source software, and public beaches. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. We build for needs outside of the financial. One could be fooled into thinking regenerative crypto economics is only about finance, but it's not. Finance is a key pillar of human society, and a financial system could be designed that acts as a channel for greater human flourishing and greater combinations of strength and intelligence to come together. To do that, there are design criteria that must be defined beyond just the financial. The 8-circuit model of consciousness is a hypothesis by Timothy Leary that suggests 8 circuits of human consciousness and 24 stages of neurological evolution. To see a graphic on the 8 circuits of consciousness, check the screen. The 8 forms of capital. Gregory Landua and Appleseed Permaculture have published a great resource on the 8 different forms of capital, of which financial capital is the only one. To see a graphic on the 8 forms of capital, check the screen. We build for the cynics. To the cynics, I wrote this book for you. I've spent time with you. I've broken bread with you. I've been called names by you. Sometimes I am one of you. I understand that there is too much energy expenditure in parts of the Web3 ecosystem. I understand that there are scams in Web3. I understand that hypercapitalism can cause harm. I understand and believe that some truly awful people have fallen ass backwards into riches because of early investments in blockchain-based systems. I understand that you are lacking hope. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is genuine net zero emission innovation here that is truly helping people. After all, if we had listened to the cynics in the late 90s who said things like, the internet is just for porn, we would not have the internet today. We build to accelerate the good things already happening because of Web3. In many ways, the regenerative crypto economics movement is inchoate. But there are a handful of good things that are already happening as a side effect of the Web3 movement. Number 1, there is lots of new pressure being put on big tech to reform. This market-based pressure is complementary to and separate from regulatory pressure. Number 2, there is new pressure to invest in central bank digital currencies and other means of creating more digital democracy. Number 3, there is an incredible community of talented and civic-minded individuals, and that has opened the conversational space around new political economies. Number 4, lots of money has poured into privacy tech that wouldn't have otherwise. Number 5, access to Western financial instruments like the dollar in places that traditionally would not have access. We build for the infinite garden. The Web3 ecosystem has been described as an infinite garden. The vibrant communities of developers, entrepreneurs, artists, and crypto enthusiasts who are traversing a new economic design space are rapidly evolving strategies to cooperate, compete, or coexist with one another. The boundaries between these projects is sometimes not clear. All of these different, diverse fauna are growing all over each other, each trying to create as much success for themselves and their own ecosystem as possible. We are in a Cambrian explosion of finance, where every paradigm-changing project launch can lead to hundreds of copycats. Each project implosion can lead to hundreds running in another direction. We are speed-running the evolution of this ecosystem until we get to the crypto equivalent of mammals. We build for donut economy. To see a graphic for this section, check out the screen. The donut economy framework developed by Kate Rayworth is a way of understanding sustainable development visually. It combines the concept of planetary boundaries, the outer layer, with the concept of social boundaries, the inner layer. In between the planetary boundaries and the social boundaries, there is a safe space for humanity to consume just enough resources to meet social goals without crossing the planetary boundaries. There are Web3 projects that are working to tokenize resources in both layers, which in sum would allow markets to create the balance between the layers of the system. We build to understand the hyperobject. Hyperobjects are objects which have a vitality to them, but you can't touch them. Their effects may be experienced even if they cannot be necessarily touched. A hyperobject can be an aggregation of networked individuals with the potential to produce profound and unescapable shifts in the conditions of existence. Web3 is a hyperobject. Many cryptoeconomic systems are hyperobjects themselves. We build for change of self and change of system. When designing coordination mechanisms, one should be aware of the delicate and sometimes complicated interplay between the systems being designed and the actors who will inhabit those systems. In 2017, during the ICO boom, there was an overemphasis on change of system. Thousands of token designers took Charlie Munger's famous quote, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome," literally, and assumed if you took a human plus you put in a token, you get an outcome. Turns out human beings don't work that way. This is an example of an overemphasis on change of system. Conversely, it is possible to overemphasize change of self. In a system with hundreds or millions of actors, change of self can be a powerful agent of change, but it can also be a drop in the ocean. This book advocates a balanced approach. It would be prudent for mechanism designers of regenerative cryptoeconomics to design their systems around individuals. We build for a diverse tapestry of values. One interesting opportunity in Web3 is to allow different communities to come up with their own currencies that reflect their own local values. By allowing communities to participate in value system creation, we allow them to articulate what is important to them. The larger a currency may be, the more it reflects global or commodified values. The end result of an internet of all these local community currencies is like a tapestry of different value systems. Each tapestry weaves the different socio-cultural, economic, and ecological games, norms, cryptoeconomic primitives into a tapestry, which represents the diversity and breadth of human value systems today. This journey leads us from the more objective, international sources of trust to a more subjective and local. From the cryptographically verifiable energy expenditure in a remote data center that is today's proof of work, to the communally verifiable delivery of life-sustaining care work that is tomorrow's proof of care, and proof of plant, and proof of open source contribution. We build for Game B. A quote from Game B Wiki. Game B is a memetic tag that aggregates a myriad of visions, projects, and experiments that model potential future civilizational forms. The flag on the hill for Game B is an anti-fragile, scalable, increasingly omni-win-win civilization. This is distinct from our current rivalrous Game A civilization that is replete with destructive externalities and power asymmetries that produce existential risk. Yet, Game B is not a prescriptive ideology or an ideology at all. While the eyes of Game B players may be fixed on the same flag, the hills are multitudes and the flag sits atop each, and no player individually is equipped to map a route in advance. To learn more about Game B, check out the Game B Wiki at gameb.wiki or by clicking the link in the description. We build for the homesteaders of the metaverse. In 2021, the metaverse has become a hot buzzword, meaning many things to many people. To us, the metaverse is a world increasingly intermediated by the digital. In Web 2, there are no digital property rights. We were all serfs on Facebook or Twitter or Google's land. In the Web 3 metaverse, the hope is that there is true ownership of the digital by the individuals who inhabit it. How does the Web3 metaverse get built without the massive war chests that the tech giants use to subsidize the build-outs of their metaverses? Regenerative crypto economics at scale would ensure a funding of digital infrastructure that is not owned by any tech giant. By providing funding for the public good to homesteaders in the metaverse, regenerative crypto economics will make it more likely that the Web3 metaverse wins. We build for human thriving. We build for a bento box of incentives. We build for public goods. We build for needs outside of the financial. We build for the cynics. We build to accelerate the good things already happening because of Web3. We build for the infinite garden. We build for the donut economy. We build to understand the hyperobject. We build for a change to self and change of system. We build for a diverse tapestry of values. We build for Game B. We build for the homesteaders of the metaverse. Chapter 3. When? Our Moment of Opportunity. A quote from R. Buckminster Fuller. We are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. Web3 is a shelling point for the hopeful. We reject the doomerism left to us by the legacy generations and legacy institutions. We believe that Web3 is a shelling point, a game-theoretic focal point for the hopeful, and we have come together to build a better world around it. Our weapon of choice is novel mechanism design, deployed to decentralized blockchain networks. By co-creating this shelling point, we will reconnect with why we're actually here and accelerate this narrative of regenerative crypto economics. Web3 is a more solid foundation for human thriving. Web3 is a global, transparent, immutable, programmable substrate for finance. This is our moment to build infrastructure for regenerative financial infrastructure for the world. The goal of this book is to document and teach the game-theoretic concepts behind regenerative crypto economics. $2.1 trillion. The value of the open-source financial system as of January 2022. What if we could use all of this capital for good? The idea from first principles. Number 1. There's $2.1 trillion in market cap in blockchain-based networks. Number 2. It's all built on open-source software, a public good. Number 3. We can redirect some of that capital to support the public good. All of the money that used to go to some back office on Wall Street in the old financial system will now go to open-source software. Given the rational need to prevent black swan events like hacks, unexpected downtime, etc., by supporting the digital infrastructure beneath our digital assets, it should be possible to build an aqueduct to financially support the most necessary public goods. With programmable money, we can program our values into our money. The idea from first principles. Number 1, we value public goods. Number 2, with programmable money, we can program our values into our money. Number 3, we can make public goods sustainable financially. With a Turing-complete smart contract programming language, programmers can now design economic systems around their values. This is, of course, a double-edged sword as value systems can vary widely. By aligning incentives of many participants, system designers can create economies that externalize good as widely as possible. We can create new, non-skeuomorphic use cases of finance. The idea from first principles. Number 1, the Internet brought us novel uses of information services. For example, we now use IM, Twitter, RSS, or email more than we use the postal system. Number 2, The blockchain can bring us novel uses of financial services. Number 3, what kinds of novel uses of finance will emerge? Which one of those will be able to fund public goods or other human thriving? Skeuomorphism is the design concept of making items represented resemble their real-world counterparts. The most interesting and revolutionary uses of regenerative cryptoeconomics will be non-skeuomorphic. They could not have existed before cryptoeconomics did. In the past, trust networks were local. In the old world, trust was oriented around relationships which were based upon our geographic locations. On the internet, we have niche interests, and our networks of relationships are built around them. We can now build global trust networks. Niches are the new nation-states. Each niche has its own network of participants and could one day have infrastructure for public good built around these global trust networks. Local networks versus global networks. As trust begins to flow worldwide, but we retain our physical presence, there will be numerous confrontations between and integrations between digital and global networks of actors, plus physical and local networks of actors. We can build a financial system that acts as a channel for greater human flourishing and greater combinations of strength and intelligence to come together. No more tail wagging the dog. As humanity upgrades its infrastructure for the digital age, the questions we must ask are, is the new financial system better than the old one? Number 1, is it transparent? Number 2, is it fair? Number 3, is it accessible? Number 4, is it captured by elites, old elites or new elites? Number 5, is it in service of the many or the few? Number 6, does it invest in outcomes beyond quarterly profit cycle? Number 7, does it reduce suffering or increase it? Number 8, is it in service of greater combinations of human intelligence and strength to come together, or is it only in service of itself? Number 9, who is designing it and what are their incentives? The constraints stack. To see a graphic on this section, check the screen. Let us take a moment to articulate the constraints stack of human civilization from mathematics to culture. At the bottom is mathematics, then physics, power structures, law, finance, media, and at the top, culture. Regenerative cryptoeconomics traverses the stack from finance and law up. Because cryptoeconomics can help monetize culture, media, or finance in novel ways, it can be used to rewrite these portions of the stack to be more transparent, immutable, credibly neutral, and global in nature. Spiral dynamics. To see a graphic on this section, check the screen. Spiral dynamics is a model of the development of individuals, organizations, and societies, developed by Dr. Ed Beck and Chris Cohen. It starts at the most human level of instinctive, survivalistic, and moves upward into the magical, animistic, impulsive, egocentric, purposeful, authoritarian, achievist, strategic, communitarian, egalitarian, integrative meme, and the highest point of holistic meme. Spiral dynamics describes how worldviews and value systems emerge from the interaction of life conditions and the people in them. Each value system is neither positive or negative, but is a response to the local environment. Each value system may also be a response to the problems of the previous system. The scope of spiral dynamics is quite broad, and is therefore beyond the purview of this book, but there are many other excellent resources out there available, including a book by Dr. Ed Beck and Chris Cohen. The 4 social revolutions. Hunter-gatherer. The primary means of subsistence are wild plants and animals. Humans are nomadic and non-hierarchical. Agricultural. The primary means of subsistence is the cultivation of crops. Humans settle down and become hierarchical. Industrial. The primary means of subsistence is industry. The mechanized manufacture of goods, social hierarchies, and division of labor become more complex. Information. The primary means of subsistence is services or information services. Social hierarchies and culture become even more complex. From the industrial to the information age. As humanity transitions from the industrial age to the information age, we are in for profound shifts in how society self-organizes itself. The first was the Internet. The Internet of Information, 1990s to present, changed everything in society that relies on information because computers could now send information across a network without an intermediary. Everything that relied upon information, media, entertainment, politics, and news changed drastically as a result. The Internet of Value, 2009 to present, could change everything in society that relies on value. Computers can now send value across a network without an intermediary. Anything that relies on value transfer, finance, art, gaming, work, public goods funding could change drastically as a result. These shifts come at a time when there is profound mistrust in the industrial age institutions that our parents and grandparents relied upon. As technological evolution exponentially compounds and our democratic institutions evolve on a much slower timescale than the technology that is powering the choices of citizens or consumers that participate in government, we have seen massive disillusionment on behalf of individuals who feel that the system no longer works for them. Will democratic institutions be able to upgrade themselves to become more web-scale and Internet native? In this regard, many of us are following the lead of Audrey Tang, the Digital Minister of Taiwan. Digital Democracy in Taiwan. Audrey Tang's first initiative was called the GovZero Project, and it swapped out the O for a zero in the government's top-level domain, gov.tw, to view more accessible and interactive versions of these government websites. The project was open source, which invited contributions from across the country, and the projects were used millions of times per month. Another initiative, vTaiwan, used social media paradigms to create digital petitions. Petitions with over 5,000 signatures were brought to the premier and government ministries to be addressed. Changes implemented through this system include access to income tax software for non-Windows computers and changes to cancer treatment regulations. Tang practices radical transparency, and all of her meetings are recorded, transcribed, and uploaded to a public website. She also publicly responds to questions sent through another website. Tang is a fervent believer in open data, open governance, and civil society government collaboration. High bandwidth democracy. We are at a critical moment when we face seemingly insurmountable challenges from growing economic disparity, climate change, and global pandemic. Our governing systems are stifled with deepening polarization, and that is halting progress. Taiwan is seen as a model for how democracies could be upgraded for a more digital-forward population, an important example of a more digital democracy in a world that is turning more authoritarian. To get involved in conversations about how to upgrade democracy for the 21st century, we recommend checking out the RadXchange movement at radicalxchange.org. The consent of the governed. In political science, the idea of the consent of the governed is foundational. A government's legitimacy and moral right to use its power is only justified and lawful when consented to by the people or society in which that political power is exercised. This is in contrast to the divine right of kings, which had historically been invoked. One problem with the powerful Web 2 platforms is that they do not seek the consent of their user base for any of the changes that they roll out to the platform, nor do they allow their users to exit the system without a high cost. Regenerative cryptoeconomic systems aim to do better by allowing users of the system to govern the system along with other stakeholders, and to provide the ability to exit from the system if they disagree with the changes. The ideal outcome is that these foundational investments in the consent of the governed create healthier communities over the long term. We can go to the quadratic lands. The quadratic lands is a mythical place where we've rewritten the laws of economics to support public goods, prevent coordination failures, and create human thriving. It's a place where the distance between value creation and value capture has been collapsed. And so people work on things that create value instead of just those that can capture it. By practicing regenerative cryptoeconomics, we can build a vessel to the quadratic lands. We can build a more solar punk future. Solar punk is an art movement that envisions how the future might look if humanity succeeded in solving major contemporary challenges with an emphasis on sustainability, climate change, and pollution. Solar punk is optimistic and fundamentally high-tech and high-life. It emphasizes a deep integration between, rather than a separation of, technology and the environment, in addition to convivial conservation, self-sustainability, and social inclusiveness. By practicing regenerative cryptoeconomics, we can build a more solar punk future. Chapter 4. What? Designing Coordination Games. An anonymous quote, "It's all coordination, and it always has been." Coordination games. A coordination game is a type of simultaneous multiplayer game found in game theory. It describes the situation where a player will earn a higher payoff when they select a coordinated path of action relative to another player's actions. Coordination games are built around Nash equilibria. Nash equilibria. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. A Nash equilibrium is a way to define an optional solution to a game involving two or more players. If each player has chosen a strategy and no player can increase their own expected payoff by changing their strategy, while the other players keep their own strategies unchanged, then it can be said that a set of strategy choices constitutes a Nash equilibrium. If a unique Nash equilibrium exists for a game, then all players can be rationally expected to converge to the state represented by the equilibrium. It is possible for multiple Nash equilibria to exist in a game. The prisoner's dilemma. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. The prisoner's dilemma is a category of coordination game where the incentives of the players diverge and, without a mechanism for coordination between players, a rational player will choose their own benefit at the expense of other players. Here's how it works. Imagine two members of a criminal organization are arrested and imprisoned. Each prisoner has no means of communicating with the other. Suppose the prosecutors lack sufficient evidence to convict the pair on the primary charge, but they have enough to convict both on a secondary charge. Simultaneously, the prosecutors offer each prisoner a bargain. Each prisoner is given the opportunity either to betray the other by supply evidence that the other committed the crime, or to cooperate with the other by remaining silent. The possible outcomes are: if player A and player B each betray each other, each of them serves 2 years in prison. Or, if player A betrays player B, but player B remains silent, player A will be set free and player B will serve 3 years in prison. Or, if player A remains silent, but player B betrays player A will serve 3 years in prison and player B will be set free. Or, if player A and player B both remain silent, both of them will serve only 1 year in prison on the lesser charge. As betraying the other player offers a greater reward than cooperating with them, all purely rational, self-interested prisoners without the ability to coordinate will betray the other. Only mutual cooperation would yield greater reward, but with no way to coordinate towards that, it is not likely to happen. Zero-sum games. A zero-sum game is a type of game in game theory where if one party loses, the other party wins, and vice versa. Zero-sum games can include only 2 players or many participants. In financial markets, the investment mechanisms, futures, and options are considered zero-sum games. This is because the contracts represent agreements between 2 parties, and if one investor loses, the wealth is transferred to another investor. In a zero-sum game, it is not possible for one party to advance its position without the other party suffering an equal and opposite loss. Positive-sum games. Positive-sum games, in theory, are those games in which the sum of the winnings and losses is greater than 0, a net positive. Like zero-sum games, positive-sum games can include just 2 players or many participants. In positive-sum games, it is possible for multiple parties or all parties to mutually benefit. As regenerative cryptoeconomics emphasizes games that are net positive, it often involves designing positive-sum games. In the past, incentive systems were fragmented. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. Charlie Munger once famously said, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." As members of the world economy, we are subjected to many different incentive systems daily. We try to maximize our bank account balances so we can purchase private goods. We recycle to maximize our positive impact on public goods. We can create new augmented and integrated incentive systems. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. Oftentimes, these incentive systems align. Other times, they are misaligned. With programmable, blockchain-based economic systems, there is a new opportunity to design crypto-economic incentive systems to be aligned with one another. When incentive systems are aligned, more economic agents will take the aligned actions than before. What if we could align the incentive systems between public, private, and common goods to create more human thriving? Our mind's limit, Dunbar's number. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. Dunbar's number is a cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships. Dunbar's number was first proposed by Dr. Robin Dunbar, who proposed that humans can only comfortably maintain 150 total stable relationships. A stable social relationship is defined as a relationship in which an individual knows who each person is and how each person relates to every other person. Dunbar's number has since been broken down further into: number 1, 5 close friends; number 2, 15 super family; number 3, 50 clan; number 4, 150 tribe. Beyond these limits, stable social relationships have not been traditionally possible. Technology is a bicycle for the mind. Steve Jobs once famously called computers a bicycle for the mind because computers allowed one to become more efficient and go further in one's thinking, similar to how a bicycle allows one to go physically further. If computers are bicycles for our mind, do they offer more efficient thinking, more efficient communication, more efficient trust? If so, it should be possible to maintain stable social relationships with a higher number of people. If technology could 5x the number of stable social relationships the median human can have, how would that change the social-economic graph of the whole world? Bentoism, beyond near-term orientation. Yancey Strickler, the founder of Kickstarter, is the author of The Theory of Bentoism. Bentoism, an acronym for Beyond Near-Term Orientation, is a wider lens for what's valuable and what is in our self-interest. Bentoism is the theory that self-interest is multidimensional. Instead of focusing on designing systems for instant gratification, now me, we propose that regenerative cryptoeconomic systems that build for human thriving expand their design space from me to us and from now to future. To learn more about Bentoism, go to the Bento Society's website at bentoism.org. Expanding the bento box. Traditional bento boxes contain 4 cells: now me, now us, future me, future us. This concept could be further extended with more granularity. Future could mean tomorrow, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 decade, 1 century, or anything in between. Us could mean 2 people, 5 people, 15 people, 50 people, 150 people, an entire city, nation, or world, and everything in between. When designing coordination games, it is possible to create games that are net positive across this entire expanded bento box. Designing for the evolution of trust. 3 things to build towards: repeat interactions, possible win-wins, low miscommunication. When designing coordination games, to build mechanisms that are not fragile, design for mechanisms that are easier to defend than to attack. For example, cheaper to coordinate than to defect. Examples. In ETH2 proof of stake, this principle is at work because it is cheap to defend the system and costly and risky to attack it. In our information environment, the incentives are broken. This is because it is cheap to spread misinformation but costly to correct it. This is captured by the old trope: a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. The Matthew Effect. The Matthew effect of accumulated advantage is sometimes summarized by the adage, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The concept is applicable to the cumulative advantage of economic capital, but can also apply to matters of fame or status or other types of resources. Because the Matthew effect is a repeatable pattern in human social systems, economic systems will typically consolidate in the hands of a rich elite. Beating the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect is a fundamental law of economic systems, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be mitigated. Just as the Wright brothers defied physical gravity when they invented the airplane, we can build economic systems that counteract the Matthew effect. Web3 founders can defy economic gravity, in this case the consolidation into the hands of the rich and the few, with thoughtful design. Just as the Wright brothers defied physical gravity when they invented the airplane, we can build economic systems that counteract the Matthew effect. Web3 founders can defy economic gravity. In this case, the consolidation into the hands of the rich and the few with thoughtful design. There are 3 ways we can design to compensate against or fundamentally counteract the Matthew effect when building regenerative cryptoeconomic systems. 1. Do not externalize harm. 2. Favor one person, one vote instead of one token, one vote. Or 3. Leverage other regenerative mechanisms in our design. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. To see a graphic for this section, check the screen. Free rider problem. If you give people the choice to support public goods or not, rationally self-interested people without a coordination mechanism will often free ride on public goods. If enough people free ride, the whole system collapses due to lack of support. This is why many regenerative cryptoeconomic problems attempt to solve the free rider problem. Public good funding administration problems. Number 1. Administration of public goods can be high overhead. Number 2. Governments are not efficient vehicles to administer public goods. Number 3. Governments are coercive. Number 4. Anytime you've got a pot of money, you could have the capacity for corruption in the administration of said goods. Many regenerative cryptoeconomic problems attempt to solve these problems by creating efficiency, verifiability, and scale in administering funding campaigns. 8 principles for managing a commons. 1. Clearly defined boundaries. 2. Congruence between appropriation and provision. 3. Collective choice arrangements. 4. Monitoring. 5. Graduated sanctions. 6. Conflict resolution mechanisms. 7. Minimal recognition of rights to organize. 8. Nested enterprises. Elinor Ostrom was an American political economist whose research centered around the governance of common resources. Her research focused on common natural resources like fishing, timber, irrigation water for farmland, land for grazing, but also more intangible resources like information. For each of these resources, it is expensive to control and fence in consumption. The problem with these types of resources is they may be overexploited, or at least their care and/or sustainability can often be overlooked by users. Ostrom showed that within communities, rules or institutions can emerge to ensure a sustainable and shared management of resources. Importantly, these institutions were bottom-up and efficient from an economical point of view. On legitimacy. Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, describes legitimacy in one of his blog posts. Quote, "Legitimacy is a pattern of higher-order acceptance. An outcome in some social context is legitimate if the people in that social context broadly accept and play their part in enacting that outcome, and each individual person does so because they expect everyone else to do the same." Unquote. Legitimacy is a pattern that emerges naturally in many coordination games, and it informs each agent in a coordination's mental model for what they can expect other agents to do. The ways legitimacy is created or destroyed are: Number 1. Legitimacy by brute force. Number 2. Legitimacy by continuity. Number 3. Legitimacy by fairness. Number 4. Legitimacy by process. Number 5. Legitimacy by performance. Number 6. Legitimacy by participation. When designing regenerative cryptoeconomic systems, legitimacy is an important design goal. For more on legitimacy, check out Vitalik's excellent blog post. A link is included in the description. Opportunity. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. In the analog financial system, it's hard to fund public goods, a collectivist favorite, without taxes, which individualists loathe. In Web 3, we can design new mechanisms which fund public goods without taxation, since this creates an opportunity for a healthy mixture of autonomy and interdependence. It also creates an opportunity to build cultural bridges between individualists and collectivists. When designing regenerative cryptoeconomic mechanisms, look for expression of individual preference within the context of the larger community collective. DAOs equal unbundled governance of public goods. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. In the legacy world, many public goods, if they are maintained at all, are bundled into a handful nation-state government. In the digital world, public goods can be unbundled into many DAOs that interoperate with one another. Within the DAO ecosystem in 2022, many projects are beginning to emerge that export public good. One example is ENS, a system that supports the discoverability of actors in the Ethereum ecosystem with a freely available public good, ENS. They have released a scarce governance token called ENS to govern the system. Chapter 5. How? Coordination Mechanisms. An anonymous quote. Our weapon of choice is novel coordination mechanisms deployed to decentralized blockchain networks. The mechanism that started it all. To understand the opportunity that Web3 presents, you must understand the breakthrough that created the opportunity that is Web3. The root problem with conventional fiat currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. A central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency. Each individual bank must not lie about its balances. But the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. To remove the trust inherent in the financial system, Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, needed to solve the Byzantine general's problem. The Byzantine general's problem describes the difficulty that decentralized systems have in agreeing on a single truth, and was a problem that plagued monetary systems for a long time until the invention of Bitcoin. Byzantine's general's problem. The game theory behind this problem is as follows. Several generals are besieging a town called Byzantium. They have surrounded the city, but they must collectively decide to attack. If all of the generals attack at the same time, they win. But if they attack at different times, they lose. The messages between the generals may have been intercepted and deceptively sent by their enemies. How can the generals organize to solve the problem? Bitcoin solved this game theoretic problem by using a proof-of-work mechanism to establish a clear, objective rule set for the blockchain. In order to add information or blocks to the blockchain, a member of the network must publish proof that they invested work into creating the block. This work imposes large costs on the creator and thus incentivizes them to publish honest information. Because the rules are objective, there can be no disagreement or meddling with the information on the Bitcoin network. The rule set governing which transactions are valid and which are invalid is also objective, as is the system for determining who can mint new Bitcoin. Funding generation mechanisms. Inflationary rewards. A Web3-based system can create inflationary rewards from its monetary supply and use those funds to support public goods. This can be powerful if demand for the system is growing faster than inflation, but dangerous inflationary devaluation can occur if not. Philanthropy, the generous donation of money to good causes for altruistic reasons. Typically the desire to promote the welfare of others. Early Gitcoin grants rounds were funded this way. NFT sales. The birth of NFTs has given art a business model. And for those with cultural capital, the creation of cultural assets in the form of NFTs has proven to be an effective way to raise money for the public good. Gitcoin grants round 9 through 11 were partially funded this way. Sequencer fees. The Optimism L2 network has pledged to donate 100% of their early sequencer fees to the public good of the Ethereum network. Since Optimism does $100,000 per day in sequencer fees, this has been a very successful way of funding public goods. Transaction fees. Prominent DeFi protocols have implemented fee switches into their protocols, which, if turned on, could be a power funding generation mechanism for the public good. Data as labor. What if we treated the consumers of the web as creators and owners of their data? Web 2 is funded by advertising, and Web 2 advertising networks like Facebook have become hugely profitable by selling advertising. What kind of new opportunities would it provide to fund regenerative economics to give everyday citizens of the web the ability to route economic upside for their data? Any other economically exothermic mechanism, any other mechanism that's used in DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, or otherwise to generate protocol revenue could be directed to public goods. Funding generation mechanisms and funding distribution mechanisms are two sides of the same coin. Funding distribution mechanisms. Quadratic funding, a way to allocate the distribution of funds. For example, from a government's budget, a philanthropic source, or collected directly from participants, based on quadratic voting, defined on the next page. Retroactive public goods funding, a scheme to retroactively reward those who have contributed to public goods based on what a group of domain experts vote on. The core principle behind the concept of retroactive public goods funding is simple. It's easier to agree on what was useful than what will be useful. Moloch DAO, a minimum viable DAO design that invented a, quote, rage quit, unquote, a means for members to exit the DAO by exchanging their shares for a pro rata claim on the treasury's assets. Ecosystem participants can fund a Moloch DAO and easily exit their fund via rage quit if they disagree with the DAO's decisions. Web of Trust, the creation of a graph data structure of who trusts who, upon which data about who is creating the most value can be gleaned. This inter-subject data can be used to allocate tokens, used by Coordinape and SourceCred. Universal Basic Income, a socio-political financial transfer concept in which all citizens of a given population regularly receive a legally equal financial grant without a means test, typically designed to give participants stable financial footing from which to pursue other goals. Aqueduct, a conduit built to transfer water. In the Internet of Money, aqueducts have been set up to directly transfer 1% to projects like Gitcoin, Radical Drips, or the Protocol Guild. Some projects that receive aqueducts decide to pay their revenues forward to other projects, creating a series of multi-level aqueducts. Voting mechanisms. Ranked choice voting, an electoral system in which voters rank candidates by preference on their ballots. Number 1. If a candidate wins a majority of first preference votes, he or she is declared the winner. Number 2. If no candidate wins a majority of first preference votes, a candidate with the fewest first preference votes is eliminated. First preference votes cast for the failed candidate are eliminated, elevating the second preference choices indicated on those ballots. Number 3. A new tally is conducted to determine whether any candidate has won a majority of the adjusted votes. Number 4. The process is repeated until a candidate wins an outright majority. Quadratic voting, a collective decision-making procedure which involves individuals allocating votes to express the degree of their preferences rather than just the direction of their preferences. By allowing the voting mechanism to take into account the degree of preferences, a more optimal expression of preferences can be achieved. Conviction voting offers a novel decision-making process that funds proposals based on the aggregated preference of community members, expressed continuously. By allowing the voting mechanism to take into account conviction, a more optimal expression of preferences can be achieved. Mechanisms continued. Staking, a way of putting tokens at risk in order to express conviction in a specific thing at an individual level or secure a system at a system level. Staked funds are subject to slashing if stakers or the objects they stake upon misbehave. Bonding curve, a scheme in which the price of a token is determined by its supply. The more tokens that have been distributed, the higher the price, and vice versa. Typically used as an elegant mechanism to manage scarcity and price. Community inclusion currencies are assignable credit obligations redeemable for goods and services. These can be issued by communities to develop sustainable local markets when national currencies are scarce. Fractal DAO protocols. They make subsidiarity easier to implement. Subsidiarity is critical for scalable, informed, participatory governance. Orca, OneHive, Swarms are examples. Natural capital-backed assets. Strictly necessary to align regenerative finance with physical natural world, not just social economic world. Curve Labs and Collectivo, formerly CuraDAO, are piloting these. Mechanisms continued. Multisig wallets. Multisig wallets allow a group of N people to control the actions of a cryptocurrency wallet if M of the N people agree on a single transaction, on a transaction-by-transaction basis. Worker co-ops. A co-op is a group of workers who have united to meet their common needs and operations through a jointly owned enterprise. Co-ops have been around for a while, but what is new in Web3 is the opportunity to allow them to hit web scale or go global. Data co-ops. A group organized for sharing pooled data from online consumers between two or more companies. Within a data co-op, members offer their data to the collective, which creates an opportunity for more economic leverage for the sale of one's data than any individual collective member could have. Minor extractable value. The maximum amount of value that can be extracted from the block production process in excess of the standard block rewards and fees. Tangibly, this means that block producers can reorder transactions in order to front-run other transactions, which in some cases can lead to a lot of profit. Mechanisms continued. Harbinger tax. A mechanism that allows an ecosystem to strike a balance between pure private ownership and total commons ownership of a resource. Number 1. Citizens value their own property and pay tax on that value. a self-assessed tax. Number 2, at any point in time, anyone else can buy the property from you at that price, forcing a sale. Lossless lotteries, a way of running a lottery such that even if you do not win the lottery, you get to keep the price of admission into such lottery. By allowing users to stake funds in a lottery and then using those funds to generate yield and rewarding the winner of the lottery with those yields, lossless lotteries are able to create a positive sum way of generating funds for winners but without taking funds from the losers. Unsolved problems and opportunities. Money Legos. Composability is the interoperability of different pieces of the Internet of Money such that they could be assembled like Legos. Each new money Lego is a freely available public good for any builder to use, creating an opportunity for each net new builder in the space to stand on the shoulders of giants. It's what creates the conditions that allow for the creation of exponentially more unique combinations of mechanisms over time. Moving beyond one-to-one coin voting is an opportunity to create more cartel-resistant forms of governance. There are inequalities and incentive misalignments even in the absence of attackers. These systems can be dominated by the rich and powerful, and outright attacks through various forms of often obfuscated vote buying in one-to-one coin voting systems. Closing the gap between value creation and value capture remains a huge opportunity for funding public goods. The more people can worry about value creation and less they worry about value capture from the business models, the more they are focusing on the public good. Mechanisms that measure value creation and reward participants for that value creation are possible with more objective or intersubjective measurement of value creation. Unsolved problems and opportunities continued. Decentralized reputation systems. Because so much value transfer in the world depends on the reputation of the parties in the transaction, it could be argued that identity is an important part of the Internet of value. When I get a job, I want to know who I'm working with. When I loan someone money, I want to know their history of repayments. When I invest in a company, I want to know the founder's reputation to understand their character. When I get into an Uber, I want to know that my driver's reputation is free of major accidents. When I log into my social feed, I want to know the credibility of the content authors I see. Proof of personhood. What if we could find a crypto-economic way to prove unique humanness? We could move the Internet of Finance from one token, one vote to one human, one vote, and unleash a wave of digital democracy. With proof of personhood, the ecosystem could move to DAOs built on one human, one vote. This unlocks use cases like, number 1, quadratic funding, number 2, one person, one vote, or quadratic voting DAOs. Number 3, Gini coefficient measurements. Number 4, universal basic income. And other use cases we haven't discovered yet. Unsolved problems and opportunities continued. Privacy, privacy, privacy. To prevent many dystopian outcomes, privacy must be baked into these mechanisms from the start. The old world model of privacy is broken. The new world privacy model will be built around zero-knowledge proofs. For example, you will be able to prove attributes about yourself without revealing any more personal information about yourselves. Persistent, pseudo-anonymous identities will be a thing. People will need practical ways to let people build deep, long-standing reputations without practically doxing their real-world identities. Organically, ETH addresses with long, complex history of transactions, NFTs, and ENS are nice, but its time frame, frequency, and diversity are hard to fake or duplicate. Other unsolved problems may exist, especially in systems with high wealth inequality, high levels of plutocracy or collusion, high energy inefficiency in some networks, high misinformation and tribalism or dependence on Web 2 social media, high extractive economics, lack of education, lack of access, and lack of diversity. Unsolved problems and opportunities continued. Impact DAO ratings DAO. Impact DAOs are the atomic unit of the regenerative cryptoeconomics movement. The positive externalities produced by each Impact DAO, when stacked upon each other, will hopefully create an entire regenerative cryptoeconomics stack. But how are we to know which Impact DAOs are truly having impact and which are just marketing? Don't trust, verify is a mantra among cryptographers. How can we apply this to the growing field of Impact DAOs? Having an Impact DAO ratings DAO, which catalog the positive and negative externalities of each Impact DAO, would be an important piece of infrastructure, provided that it is governed in a transparent and credibly neutral way to gain the legitimacy needed to be seen as impartial. Starting small with a healthy culture. It would be possible to overemphasize the creation of an academically perfect system, and in doing so, forget about the cultural and mimetic needs of a community. Starting with small pods of culture that are themselves healthy is a must. As a founder, your actions inform the actions of the first 5 people in your project. Those 5 inform the next 20, which informs the next 100, and so on. Peter Pan, the founder of Metacartel, one of the most prominent and first DAOs in Web3, is a shining example of this. He formed Metacartel as a series of pods with their own individual culture, vibes, and mission. Metacartel is not a single, monolithic group. Each pod had its own mission, goals, and focus, and tightly curated culture. They each started small and only grew when they were ready. Once they grew, they retroactively gave governance rights based upon the values they had set early. Meta patterns. Here are a few meta patterns you will find across different regenerative cryptoeconomic systems. Pluralism. Skin to biodiversity. The more pluralism there is across an ecosystem, this creates more anti-fragility as it grows. Expressivity. The collection of primitives available should reach enough to allow actors to express organizations we've not thought of yet. Simplicity, legibility. Individual primitives should be relatively simple. You can combine them into more complex assemblages. Standardization. A sufficiently large library of legible primitives that you can almost always find a known, simple, legible component that meets your needs and will accelerate innovation. Modularity, composability. This comes pretty naturally from simplicity and standardization, and assuming your collection of primitives is sufficiently expressive, you can create assemblages that do just about anything. Symmetry between value creation and value capture. When the value creation of a system is disconnected from the value capture, there will be an inherent misalignment between the incentives of actors in the system to focus on the capture of value instead of the creation of it. Therefore, regenerative cryptoeconomic systems aim for symmetry between value creation and value capture. Robust signal emission. An alternative to governance via voting, which has historically had issues with plutocracy and low voter turnout, is robust signal emission. The measurement of value creation via robust signal creation is a powerful way to allocate funds to an ecosystem of participants at scale. By measuring what communities of participants within an ecosystem value, an intersubjective consensus of the value creation from that ecosystem is created. This intersubjective consensus can form the basis of a distribution of retroactive tokenized rewards. Robust signal generation. Of course, in order to create a robust set of signals, one needs to have an active ecosystem of participants. To that end, there are a number of engagement hacking techniques that were pioneered in the Web 2 days, which also work in the Web 3 space. While they are not regenerative in nature themselves, they can be assembled into regenerative cryptoeconomic systems wherein their data emissions can be analyzed for regenerative purposes, and we include them on this basis. User engagement feedback loop. The feedback loop can work as such. Content on a platform such as Facebook or Twitter is a trigger to a user. The user takes an action to scroll, creating an opening for a reward, perhaps interesting objects. The feedback loop then completes as the user invests back into the loop by repinning, following, commenting, etc. Widely articulated by Pinterest, this articulation of a feedback loop of user engagement is designed to keep users engaged by triggering their interest to perform some action for when they are given a reward and are prompted to make further investment of time or other resources. Balancing challenge plus skill. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. When onboarding users into a system, cryptoeconomic or otherwise, be careful to balance between challenge and skill. Too far to one side and the user gets bored. Too far to another and they get frustrated. Reward types. As users become more immersed in systems, cryptoeconomic or otherwise, different types of rewards can be deployed at different times in the funnel. Chapter 6. Looking Forward. Civilizational Scale Regenerative Cryptoeconomics. An anonymous quote. As humanity transitions from the industrial age to the information age, our old institutions are decaying. In this Overton window, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build new, better, fairer institutions. What is an impact DAO? A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. Some DAOs are like global companies. Some are protocols. All of them use blockchains as a trust anchor. An impact DAO is any DAO that creates positive externalities for the ecosystem in which it resides. Impact DAOs are the scalable building block of a more regenerative economic infrastructure. Examples of impact DAOs. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. Claros, positive externality, dispute resolution. Circles UBI, positive externality, UBI for members. Proof of humanity, positive externality, Sybil resistance. ClimaDAO, positive externality, positive price pressure on carbon credits. Gitcoin DAO, positive externality, funding for public goods. One powerful attribute of clusters of impact DAOs is how the positive externalities flow between them. For example, Sybil resistance flows from proof of humanity into Gitcoin DAO, which in turn has funded projects in the Proof of Humanity ecosystem, including ClimaDAO. 2 ingredients for an impact DAO: mechanism and funding source. Impact DAOs can vary in mechanism and funding source. For a graphic on this section, check the screen. The diversity in the mechanisms and funding sources for impact DAOs creates a pluralism and anti-fragility in the way public goods are funded. The big idea. Number 1. Build a parallel opt-in system for funding digital native public goods, which operates at a greater efficiency at a greater scale. Number 2. This parallel opt-in system could increasingly support non-digital public goods. Number 3. As more people quit their private jobs to work on public good, energy in one public good seeps into another. A sense of 21st century native civic pride emerges. Momentum compounds outwards in a virtuous cycle of growth. Number 4. More global public goods get funded. Over decades, economies and democracies all over the world get upgraded to be higher bandwidth for the digital age, creating more human thriving. Impact DAOs can stack. Each Impact DAO benefits from all the stacked Impact DAOs supporting their work. Each Impact DAO benefits when public goods below them in the stack are funded. Scalability. Impact DAO stacking is how growth compounds, momentum builds, and regenerative crypto economics eventually becomes inevitable. Pluralism. Because each Impact DAO can have a different mechanism or funding source, this leads to a more pluralistic public goods funding infrastructure. Chapter 7. Git Involved. An anonymous quote: "All coordination is a choice. We have to choose the future we want in the day-to-day choices we make, not only in the types of assets we buy, but also in where we put our scarce time, attention, and skills." Contribute to the next edition of this book. If you would like to join the community of writers and educators forming around this book, please scan the QR code on the screen or go to the URL in the description. Take the green pill yourself. Pledge to support public goods at greenpilled.party or check the URL in the description. Join the fight against Moloch. Join Gitcoin DAO. Learn more about what the DAO has been up to at gitcoindao.com. Join the Funders League. Thank you to the following organizations and people who have made the work that Gitcoin DAO has done possible with their generous financial contributions: Ethereum Foundation, ENS, Optimism, Nouns DAO, Chainlink, Synthetics, Momus.eth, Balancer, Badger, Uniswap, Polygon, Kraken, Yearn, VitaDAO, Greatest LARP, Aragon, Moonshot Bots, Binance, EPNS, CMS Holdings, Stakefish, Defiance Capital and Three Arrows Capital, Mask, 0x Efault, Regen Network, Rainbow Rolls, ClimaDAO, Fire Eyes, Future Fund, Harvest Finance, Ocelot, Sushi, Stefan George, Yam Finance, Mariano Conti, Dora Hacks, Robert Leschner, Andrew Keys, 1KX, Banteg, Aztec, Robert Leschner, Integral Finance. Learn more about how you can financially support public goods on Gitcoin by going to the URL in the description. It's all coordination. It you, Anon, an inchoate virtuous cycle. All coordination is a choice. To win this coordination game, we need to choose to coordinate, to make this into a multiplayer game. Once the multiplayer game is bootstrapped, we need to choose coordination to win it. Once we win it, we must coordinate to maintain its legitimacy. We do these things not for their own sake, but as a means to create human thriving. If we collectively all take the green pill, we create a more solar punk world. If we collectively do not, we continue to maintain the status quo. Regenerative cryptoeconomics is here. It's important, and it's happening. But it is also inchoate. To grow, it needs you. The Overton window is open. Join the movement. Do what your skills and abilities uniquely enable you to do. Spread the word. Build something. Learn from your mistakes and throw it out and build something else. Host a meetup. Be honest about where we're winning and also where we fall short. Do what feels right to you. Do your own research. Beware any charismatic leader who claims to have all the answers, including me. The leader is the person who knows what to do next. And whatever you do, remember to coordinate. Written by Kevin Owocki. On Twitter, @Owocki. We are all going to make it. Wag me. The end.